Nazis in space! Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Patterns of Force, which is episode 23 of Season 2 of Star Trek The Original Series. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Original Series, one episode at a time. In this video I will cover the second season episode, Patterns of Force. So Patterns of Force is the episode in which Kirk and crew go to check up on a sociologist who had been supposed to have been observing a planet. Instead, they find a planet of Nazis that are bent on wiping out another race called the Zions, and Kirk soon finds that the sociologist is referred to as the Führer and is behind it. So Kirk has to disguise as Nazis and goes with Spock on a mission, and eventually, after teaming up with the underground of Zions, they discover that the sociologist had been drugged and manipulated by another man who they expose as the traitor, and then change the culture forever so that they will no longer be following Nazis. So, there's several ways I was thinking about going about this review. My first inclination was actually to beat around the bush, was to sort of avoid the elephant in the room and get back to it later, but I think I'm actually going to decide to go ahead and address the elephant in the room head on. This is the episode where there's Nazis. Where they travel to another planet all the way through this vast galaxy to find a world where there's people who look exactly like humans, and dressed up like Nazis and behaving like Nazis and looking like Nazis. And the entire area looks exactly like, 1940s Germany, down to the technology, the cars, the cameras. Everything is very period specific to Earth in the 1940s, and they have the swastika, so the uniforms are aesthetically exactly the same as the Nazis, and they're behaving in pretty much the exact same way as Nazis. And most of all, they refer to themselves as Nazis in an alien world far throughout this vast galaxy in the 23rd century. Now, I've talked about this before with the original series, that this is something Season 2 has done quite a bit, and is one of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of Season 2. Where it travels to a vast distance to an alien world to find a society that's just like another society we know from our own history. This was done with bread and circuses with the Romans. It was done in the Piece of the Action with 1920s gangsters, mobsters more specifically, and yeah, so it's something that the Season 2 had done several times that I'm very much against, and this is one of the more ridiculous examples. Now, to be fair, the explanation they come up with in this episode as to why there are Nazis in this alien world is more plausible than the one they come up with why there's Romans in the episode Bread and Circuses, because in that episode they didn't even bother to come up with an explanation. It was just, oh, inexplicably, here's a planet where there's human beings speaking English and there's behaving exactly like Rome would if it was existed in the 20th century. With no explanation. They even had like Christianity and other, the television, other elements that were just right out of Earth's past. No explanation whatsoever. Now, like a piece of the action, this episode does at least attempt to give an explanation. But again, it's a weak sauce explanation that doesn't actually hold up over scrutiny. And this one is actually worse because it involves extremely bad judgment. And like, why on earth would anyone do this? So, the explanation given as to why there's Nazis in space is that there was this Federation observer from Earth who apparently was a historian and had studied Earth's past, and he was noting a divide, a sort of conflict brewing within this planet. So he decided, in all of his wisdom, to groom this world, to actively interfere and groom the world to start to behave like 1940s Nazi Germany. Now, the reason why he did this is because, as a historian, he believes that Nazi Germany was the most efficient culture in Earth's history. Alright, so let's, for the sake of argument, let's say that's true. That the Nazi Germany was the most efficient governmental system that Earth has ever had. And of course, I'm sort of choking back. Yeah, I can't know. That absolutely can't be true. But let's, for the sake of argument, say that it is. Nazi Germany was very dependent on world conquest, on the Holocaust, on persecuting others, on having a very it's a very fascist society, very dictated on hatred, on bigotry, and so this genius's idea is to take a fascist society like that was all about bigotry and hatred, which is committed a genocide, by the way, and tried to conquer the entire world, in which millions of people died in the wars, on top of the genocide. And he thinks it's a peachy keen idea to try to recreate that society on this alien world. This guy is not a genius. He is the biggest moron to ever live, and I do not buy that he would fucking do this, that anyone in their right mind with an ounce of sense would try to recreate Nazi Germany on an alien world. It's the dumbest premise, one of the dumbest premises that the original series has ever done, and it makes this guy a total moron. And at first the writers try to justify it because Spock agrees, oh yes, the Nazi Germany was definitely the most efficient, and if you could have a different kind of Nazi Germany where it was benevolent and not based on hatred, then that would probably work and be the efficient society. And this dude even says that it was working for the first couple of years, but then got corrupted. So this kind of boils down to the benevolent dictator theory, a theory which I wholeheartely disagree with. I think they address it at the end of this episode, saying power corrupts absolutely, and they denounce the theory and saying that this dude was wrong, to be fair to the episode, but the episode was trying to legitimize this as like that a very brilliant scientist would actually try this. Now, yeah, so the benevolent dictator theory is that having a dictator, an absolute ruler, could work as long as they were benevolent, as long as they weren't malevolent, as long as they were peaceful and pushed a better world. And I'm very much and I think this episode agrees with me, to be fair, that they're very much against that theory, that very nature of having a dictator just invites corruption. And it is definitely, and anyone with that much power is going to be corrupted, and nobody should have that much power, regardless of how well intentioned they are. Which is part of the thinking behind democracies, is that the power is spread out and not given to just one individual. Now, yes, the episode tries to vindicate that at the very end, saying, "Oh, this guy was wrong," but I don't think that justifies why this guy would be dumb enough to do this in the first fucking place. Even if you do believe in the theory of a benevolent dictator recreating specifically Nazi Germany to the point of bringing back the swastika, you think is a brilliant idea? Now, I don't know if in the 60s the swastika and Nazis might have been associated more with World War II and the ensuing war, whereas I feel like in modern times, ever since like the 90s basically, has been associated more with bigotry and racism and genocide. And so maybe this episode had a different cultural difference, more of a lens of modern times, because in modern time you look at someone saying, "Oh, let's recreate Nazis," it's like you are going to recreate people who are going to commit genocide. You're going to recreate bigots. You're going to recreate racists. And the funny thing is, that's exactly what fucking happens in this episode, is that the well-intentioned dumbass scientist is overturned by someone who's corrupt and uses it to basically create his own genocide against a neighboring alien planet and their species, which plot-wise is a bit too convenient that they just so happen to recreate World War II or the Holocaust situation so specifically. But on the other hand, it's like, you know, the scientists kind of asked for it by bringing back Nazis and showing them how to make swastikas and recreating the Nazi uniform to a T. See, that's the other thing I don't buy, is that they have cars, they have telephones, the telephone poles, the streets, everything just so happens to look exactly like 1940s Nazi Germany, and they had the exact same uniforms. I think some of them Nazi officers even spoke with a German accent. It is just a ridiculous, off-the-cuff, nonsensical excuse to have a Nazi episode in Star Trek. Now, as I talked about in these other episodes I covered in Season 2 that did this bullshit, future iterations of Star Trek would find a better way to bring back historical context into a modern Star Trek show, and that is the holodeck. And so this was the time before they had the holodeck, so they just, had to travel to another world where there happened to be Nazis. Which is more ridiculous. As much as I hate holodeck episodes, at least it makes sense. Well, except for why the entertainment system where it malfunctions and often tries to kill you all the fucking time, and people don't seem to take that seriously. But that is at least not as bad as this. So yes, this is the dumbest thing, and it's really hard for me to get over this episode, or look beyond this ridiculous, nonsensical, dumb excuse for a premise, which is just an excuse so they could do like a World War II-esque, Nazi-esque episode. It's some lazy, terrible, bad writing. Now, let me get to the, now that I've addressed the elephant in the room, let me get to the other point I was going to make. So let me break down this episode. This episode is essentially doing a fuck ton of world building and introducing new characters really fast without earning it. It just happens like really, really fast, and there's like really world-changing sociological events happening like at lightning speed. So, and what the actual story of the episode boils down to is Kirk and Spock trying to infiltrate the Nazis. So they had to dress up like Nazis, but they get captured by this one group and they get tortured, and then they escape, and then they get tortured again, and then they have to dress up again. And so that's the essential plot of the episode. In the meantime, we're throwing in all this world building shit super fast. Like, for example, the villain, I can't remember the dude's name, but the villain who was manipulating the Federation guy wasn't even introduced into the episode till like, I think 15 minutes towards the end. Like in the last 15 minutes of the episode, we're all of a sudden thrown this guy, and then we're met this Zion guy, and then very quickly we're shown that his wife was brutally killed in the streets, like exhibition thrown at him. We meet his brother very quickly, and nothing happens to it. And there was this a woman that we saw very briefly in the news feed, and then we see her later that she's actually, working with the Zion Resistance. It's like we weren't even introduced to this woman, and then all of a sudden she becomes a quick character, and then we're introduced to this concept of the whoever they are, the Nazis building this huge fleet to go wipe out the Zions, or the Zayons, sorry. I don't know if I was referring to them as Zions, but that's obviously what they're basing it off of, but they did pronounce it more like Zayons. But anyway, they're going to wipe out the Zayons, and and then apparently that one dude, the evil dude, was manipulating the Federation dude. And and there was another Nazi dude who encountered Kirk earlier, who was also working with the Resistance, just so happens. So you see, there's all these like boom, 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 boom plot points that just fly by you that they try to throw in a 45-minute episode that is more focused on Kirk and Spock getting captured, tortured, released, captured, tortured, released. And in between these captured, tortured, released, we get all these freaking world-level events happening, and they are just flown by super fast. It is an extremely sloppy way for storytelling. Now, at the end, Kirk manages to wake up the Federation guy, and he makes his speech, and the evil guy finds out about this, gets pissed off, and grabs the machine gun and kills him. And then when the Zeon guys kills that dude, and so then the two people who were within the Nazi group who were working with the Zeon Resistance, they say, well, we're gonna, take over now, essentially become the leaders, and we're going to stop this invasion, and we're going to stop the whole Nazi movement, and we're going to make peace with the Zayons. And then Spock says something to Kirk, something akin to, oh, well, this is such a great world now. The two alien races have come together to make peace. They would make great Federation members. Are you out of your fucking mind, Spock? I mean, it's probably going to take them decades to overcome the horror of what just occurred. There was a genocide committed akin to the Holocaust, is deeply what they were implying, and they nearly wiped out the entire race. And just because they managed to kill that one evil dude, there were obviously tons and tons of very loyal Nazis who might not care that the dude's dead, and that the Fuhrer actually might not believe that the Fuhrer was against everything they thought he was for, and create a splinter group and be loyalist and try to assassinate the dude and maybe even the guy and the woman who took over, and maybe there'll even be a civil war, and maybe some of the Zeons won't forgive these other aliens, or maybe there'll be social strife, maybe there'll be inequality. For Spock to immediately go to, oh, they should just join the Federation, what a peaceful world, the instant they like that one dictator guy just happened to get assassinated, is some of the most illogical reasoning I've ever seen in Star Trek. It is nonsensical how they think these vast, social movements that usually take decades, sometimes centuries, to come into effect. I mean, there's some societies that would take some centuries to get over a conflict like that. I mean, how long has it been since World War II and the Holocaust? About 80 years, I think, and it's still having effect on societies today. It's still having effect on the Jewish people, and it still has an effect on movements like the neo-Nazis. There's still Nazis today trying to revive the movement. So to think that these kind of vast world-level traumatic incidents and issues would be able to overcome as soon as the guy is shot is beyond idiotic. And so, there's not much I really like about this episode. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world because it was slightly entertaining to watch. I did think it was well acted. I think some of these characters, like the Zion dude, was interesting. It's just very rushed. Like, they just rushed through his storyline. They rushed through the introduction of the, Nazi who was actually a resistance empathizer. They rushed through these storylines so quickly, just threw all this world building crap so fast, and focused more on, Kirk and Spock with their shirts off getting whipped. And it's the same, basically story-wise, this is almost the exact same thing as Bread and Circuses, where Kirk and Spock, had to team up with the local resistance. They get captured, and they try to negotiate with the evil leader, and then they try to infiltrate them, and they get captured again. It's very similar. And so it's not good. So anyway, I think that's pretty much all I gotta say about this episode. So now, of course, let me thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. Very much appreciated. Does keep the channel going. There's Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Matty Jester, Joel Lavals, Brian A., Alessandro Miguelacio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal House. Thank you all so very much for your support. As always, very much appreciated. So we do have a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Ricky. Oh my god, talk about one of the most dumbest premises ever on Star Trek. A Nazi episode. Really? Really? I know that season 2 is infamous for so many Earth-like planets and cultures, but damn, this one takes the cake. Again, like a piece of the action, instead of a book that influences the whole world, has been influenced by one man on who thought that this was a brilliant idea. What a dumbass. Leaving that aside, this episode is boring, and it's the same cliche where Kirk and Spock get captured and they are tortured, and then they are in a secret rebellion hideout and get involved to stop this and save the day. I'm sorry, but the whole episode is stupid. I hate it with a passion, and it's one of the worst for me, so my rating is a big fat 1 out of 10. And as always, me and Ricky, on the same page. And then we have another comment from Brandon Neal House. So Brandon Neal House says, patterns of force. Some pronounce it Zion, some pronounce it Zayon. I wonder which is correct, but of course it is all an allusion to Zion, the state of Israel. I could never understand the difference between the Ecosians and the Zayons, apart from the fact that the Zayons have Jewish-sounding names. I've always found watching this episode a very uncomfortable experience, with the possible exception of the whipping of Kirk and Spock, which I'm sure inspired some erotic fan fiction. How many Vulcan neck pinches does Spock administer during this episode? Should we be worried that Paramount has so many different Nazi uniforms lying around? Hell, it's making me nervous. Medgar Evers famously said, "You can kill a man, but you can't kill an idea," which both Picard and Sisko have paraphrased. I do not buy that killing of Gil and Melicon requires no follow-up mention or episode. Please don't make me watch this again. 2 Jewish men playing Nazis out of 10. Geez. Yeah, I'm sorry. I won't make you watch it again. But I do thank you for your comments. Yeah, I am absolutely positive that the Spock and Kirk with their shirts off getting whipped has inspired some erotic fan fiction. I'm sure it has. But yeah, I thought they pronounced it Zayon through most of the episode, but I don't know. I could be wrong. But Paramount has a lot of Nazi uniforms around for the Indiana Jones films as well. Maybe they used them for that. Anyway, thank you also very much for your comments. So my rating for Patterns of Force out of 10 is also going to be a 2, extremely poor. It's not quite a 1 because it was slightly entertaining to watch. As I said, there was some good acting. Some of the characters were interesting if they weren't sped through so quickly. Even if there wasn't about Nazis in space, which automatically makes this a bad episode, they still blow through all this vast world building way too quickly and focus more on a cliche plot of Kirk and Spock getting captured and then infiltrating and then captured. And infiltrating is something we've seen before. And so not only is this episode unoriginal, it's got a ridiculous premise that is obvious the writers really just wanted to do a World War II story and didn't give much thought on how to get there. So a 2 out of 10 for me. So that is it for my review of Patterns of Force. So coming up next on Enchantment of Eternity, next Monday will be my revisited for the Ultimate Computer over on Patreon. For my Patreon supporters, I will revisit my review for the Ultimate Computer. And on Wednesday, a new review which will go public on my channel for the Omega Glory, another winner of an episode. And then Thursday, of course, episode review for the series finale of Star Trek Picard. And then on Saturday, another review. Saturday is going to be my review for The Mandalorian Season 3, where I'll review the entire season at once, and the following Monday is when I'll get back to the original series with another great episode, Assignment Earth. So that's what's coming up on Enchantment of Eternity, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.